What is the right step to take when you suspect that your hormones are changing and you might be starting perimenopause?
Yeah. So the first thing I always say is, before we want to add anything, we want to clean up, right? We want to clean up our system. So it's that detox process. In my book, The Hormone Fix, I write about my 10-day keto-green hormone detox. Because of my own journey with early menopause at 39 and infertility, told I would never be able to have another child, reversing that, naturally having a baby at 41, and then hitting that full-blown perimenopause tornado at 48, realizing, okay, what I'm doing is no longer working. What do I need to do now? And that's where I came up with my keto-green approach and really focused on that intermittent fasting and cutting back on carbs, but not too low, and choosing the right ones. And then the things that increase the most powerful hormone in our body, which is oxytocin.
This show is all about helping you up-level your life, including your well-being, your relationships, your mental health, your wealth, your confidence, and your joy. I challenge you to keep an open mind as together we discover tips, tools, and advice from the experts to help you live life to your fullest potential. Welcome to the Jenna Banks Show. Dr. Anna, it is such a pleasure to have you here, to have this wonderful conversation with me today. Thank you so much for being here with me.
It's great to be here with you as well. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute delight and pleasure. And I'm going to let everyone know a little bit about your background before we get started, okay? So Dr. Anna Cabeca is a triple certified OBGYN and a hormone expert. She's the author of multiple books, including the USA Today bestseller titled The Hormone Fix. And she's the host of The Girlfriend Doctor Show, a podcast helping countless women live better lives before, during, and after menopause. Dr. Anna, I'm just delighted that you chose to be here today and have this conversation, because there are so many things I had no idea that were related to perimenopause and menopause. And that got me digging a little bit. And I realized, oh my gosh, you are the absolute expert and we can learn so much from you. And so I was just delighted when you agreed to come on the show and have this conversation. So I'm going to ask you a ton of questions. Hope you don't mind. Some of them are personal, but also just to help everyone else who might be going through this sudden onset of crazy ass symptoms that we never even knew were related to menopause, and hopefully get some ideas from you for how we can best tackle them.
Yes, I'm happy to. And I always say it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. And we're so powerful as humans, especially as women, that our body has such healing capacity that we can really overcome almost anything.
I would love it if you would take us into about the symptoms of perimenopause and maybe some of the most common symptoms that can help us identify when our hormones are starting to shift and lead us into this new phase of our lives.
Some of the most common symptoms of menopause, I would say the most common one, is weight gain without doing anything different. And that's a key. All of a sudden you're cruising along and you recognize 5 pounds, 10 pounds, like what is going on? And you really literally aren't doing anything different. And another symptom is fatigue, just exhaustion. A common one associated is the hot flashes or night sweats. And I'll just tell you a patient the other day, she's in her late 30s, actually, late 39. And she sent me a picture of her bed. She's like, I did not wet the bed. This is my night sweats, like help. And then hair loss. That's another thing. Sometimes a client will come in with a little baggie of hair and like, really, Dr. Anna, this is a lot more hair loss than I'm experiencing. And then brain fog, memory loss, inability to concentrate, feeling like you've lost your edge, a loss of libido. And those are some of the common ones. And I just let everyone know, look, we can get through this. We can get through this. We don't have to power through. We can really use lifestyle. And I often use bioidentical hormones as well later on in later perimenopause and menopause to really help when we need it. Anyway, let's just say when we need it. But so much we can do. 98% is in the lifestyle. And
when you say lifestyle, what do you mean lifestyle?
So, how we eat, when we eat, the foods we're eating. So, I call it my keto-green lifestyle with intermittent fasting, crucial to our body's ability to balance our hormones. Because when we have, where as we age, when our reproductive hormones are decreasing, insulin and cortisol are increasing. And so that's our fat storage and glucose, igniting hormone. So cortisol will ignite your glucose, and then insulin is like, okay, I need more insulin. And then you're starting to have more fat storage. So
Tell me what triggers cortisol? Because this is something on my mind right now. It's like, okay, I hear cortisol, but what triggers it? Is it like alcohol, coffee, stuff like that, or stress, or what is that?
yeah, any stress and inflammation in your body is going to trigger cortisol because cortisols are natural anti-inflammatory. So if we give you a steroid shot, if you have an allergic reaction or asthma or a rash, we might put a steroid cream on that. And that's what your body produces that naturally, that cortisol. And it's really active in stress, perceived and real stress, physical stress, mental stress, environmental stress. So all of those things can really contribute to cortisol. And it's a life-saving hormone. But when it's out, when it's going continuously day after day after day, it really starts to break us down because it's catabolic and it's very acidifying. So it will basically, like rob Peter to pay Paul, it will take minerals from your bone and muscle and break down the collagen in your skin. You'll get grayer hair faster. All of those things when cortisol's up. So by learning to manage cortisol through our thoughts and our, focusing on the positive, being in the present moment. So the food we eat, and when we eat, for instance, that definitely affects our hormone. So also with insulin, again, that fat storage hormone, the same meal eating at 12 noon will have up to 70% more insulin produced if we eat it after 7 p.m.
Oh
Same meal.
no.
Yes. Yes. So working with our biologic clock, eating earlier. So I usually narrow it down to an 8-hour eating window with breaking
Okay.
fast around 10 and finishing dinner by 6 or 7 p.m.
Oh man. That's like the opposite of what I do. I do intermittent fast, but I start at like 2 and I stop at around 10 in the evening. That is not what I'm supposed to be doing, huh?
Just shifting that time
Okay.
will make a huge difference in how you feel and how you sleep too.
So, what about hunger pangs? Because I hear 7 p.m., I end up staying up till midnight often. That's just my natural circadian rhythm. What if you're hungry before going to bed, and does that disrupt your sleep, or how can you solve for that hunger?
So train your body. It's a muscle,
Mm,
just like
okay.
anything. You have to retrain your body because it's used to eating at that time. So you're triggered. It's like we're triggered to eat at certain times and our body will get hungry. Like, hey, I know food's coming. Usually feed me at this time. And that's the
Mhm.
hormone ghrelin. It's the hunger hormone. And so what the way to fix that as you're retraining your body is so you eat a really healthy meal at 7, lower in carb because not too low, but have some healthy carbs there, like cruciferous vegetables and a small amount of berries or so something that's going to help maintain your blood sugar plus healthy fats during that time because fats will keep your blood sugar nice and even.
Mm.
And so if you do that, you'll be less hungry. And then when you're feeling that hunger, to drink water. You can drink water, sip on tea. And initially, as you're retraining, it's fine to have like a bone broth during that time or a tablespoon of almond butter. But really, again, because there's no carbs, very little carbs in
Mm.
those. So you want to, again, retrain your body to keep that glucose nice and low.
So this sounds like keto. Is this keto?
I call it keto green because the
Okay.
difference is for hormone balancing and especially for women, keto is very acidifying. And that's now why you hear in the keto world, oh, you need to drink electrolytes, you need to drink minerals and add these concoctions to your program. Like you need to eat the greens. You need to feed the
Hmm.
microbiome. Men have 10 times as much testosterone as women. So they're not going to break down muscle and bone and be as acidic as we will be as women a lot sooner. So as a woman, adding the cruciferous vegetables, the greens, the fermented food like kimchi or sauerkraut, and really and focusing on that, that's the difference. That's the difference. So there's an alkalinizing component to keep our bones healthy, our brain healthy, our cell membranes healthy, to help us age in reverse. I mean, that is a key factor. Otherwise, keto for a long time produces more cortisol. So you have to watch that.
Oh, yeah, good point. Good point. I was wondering, how can you do this long term without having enough greens and fibrous vegetables? So you just answered that. Thank you for that.
And, when you are in keto green, I also recommend feast days. So I usually say 10% fasting, 80% keto green, 10% feasting, because you want to have healthy legumes. And, like I made a lentil soup last week for
Love
my
it.
kids, and I love that, and it's so good for you in so many ways. And so you want to also keep your body flexible, metabolically flexible, because when you're fasting a long time, when you're in keto a long time, it can work against you, especially as
Mm,
women.
good to know. Good to know. Now you mentioned um, the microbiome. Would you mind do you, I don't know if you talk about that as it relates to our hormone health and menopause and perimenopause, but I'd love to get your insights into that and how it relates and what it is actually.
Yes, absolutely. The microbiome, when we talk about the microbiome, it's the bacteria that work with us through our body. Bacteria and yeast are part of that microbiome. And in our gut, when we talk about the microbiome within our gut, there's a estrobolome, a specific, strains of bacteria or function in the gut from the gut bacteria to help us detoxify and produce estrogen.
Mm.
So often, like if we're having trouble with constipation or irritable bowel syndrome, like it's hard, like your hormones are often out of whack at that point because we rely on the gut for healthy hormone metabolism.
Hmm. So the microbiome sits in our gut
Gut,
essentially.
well, all like we have bacteria on our skin, within our, urinary tract, and we have healthy bacteria within our vagina. So there's bacteria with all of us. So when we say microbiome, technically it's our whole body's microbiome, but specifically the gut microbiome is critical to get straight. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So you mentioned what is it? Kimchi, like sauerkraut. What other ways can we get the probiotics or ways to keep our microbiome healthy?
Yeah, so definitely by watching the food choices that we have so they don't have chemicals in them, antibiotics in them. So for example, we go out to dinner tonight and if we have maybe a chicken from the menu. And if that chicken, most likely, or fish has been fed or swimming in antibiotics, then we are ingesting those antibiotics.
Oh,
And that kills off our own gut microbiome. So choosing our food sources carefully, and also sugars. Sugars increase the yeast within our body and can throw that out of balance. And so we want to stay, be wary of that and really modify our food. And then again, also chemicals and GMOs and pesticides and herbicides all can adversely affect our gut microbiome.
and I've also heard that if you take antibiotics, that also can destroy some of your microbiome as well, and then you need to build that back up again. Is that true?
Always, yeah, always have to
Mm.
do probiotics after you do antibiotics, or even at the same time, just opposite times of the day, because the antibiotic will kill off the probiotic too. And there
Good
are
to
so many
know.
different strains. I get overwhelmed in it too. I mean, it's so overwhelming when we look at this and the different strains and what this one does, that one does. But in general, like good, diverse food choices and
Yeah.
incorporating some fermented foods, and even like, kefir, you can do a coconut milk kefir, or, a good yogurt will help with the gut microbiome too.
Yeah, there's a particular brand of yogurt I buy. I forget the name of it now. Ziggy's maybe or something like that, but it says clearly on the packaging that it has probiotics. So yeah, just starting to, pay attention to what you're eating, especially at this age is sounds like it's vital. No more, binging on anything and not thinking about it. It's like, this is critical, especially when it affects our symptoms and the quality of our life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so I want to take us back to the onset again of our symptoms because I want to help anyone who might be experiencing some of these things like I did. I didn't know that the weight gain, the creeping up weight gain, even though I was exercising the same and eating the same, was related to my hormone changes. That just started creeping up out of nowhere, very frustrating. But then, of course, the not night sweats, but getting hot at night, that should have been a clue for me that something was going on and I didn't know. And so, but let's say you're at that phase where you're suspecting that this is happening. And by the way, I do want to ask you, is there an age range where this might be a clue as well? Like is it too early, let's say in your late 30s, or, can you give us a clue as to when it might start?
Yeah, 35 to 50. 35 to 50 is typically when we're seeing the perimenopausal symptoms. But they can often creep up like as PMS symptoms, especially if we've had, uncomfortable periods for a long time and moodiness with our periods. And so it kind of, the more you're used to something, you stop seeing it as something new all of a sudden because it gradually creeped up with you. And oftentimes in my clinic, I see this many times. Patients will come to me and they've been put on birth control pills for the symptoms, not for birth control, not a need for birth control. So it's just masking the underlying issues versus correcting it. And I think this is what makes a huge difference in what we call root cause medicine, or incorporating functional medicine into our standard medical system. It's a little bit different way of thinking about things. Let's get to the root of the issues.
I love that. Yeah, because functional medicine is all about getting to the root of it rather than traditional Western medicine, which is about treating the symptoms, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful that you focus on functional medicine. So with that in mind, if these symptoms start to increase, or someone becomes aware, okay, maybe I am going through some of these hormone changes. I saw there's some creams out there like wild yam and progesterone and DHEA that you can just buy on, Amazon or online or whatever, right? And you have an amazing array of products, I know. And so, and you have an amazing podcast that talks about this. So I thought, who better to ask than you? What is the right step to take when you suspect that your hormones are changing and you might be starting perimenopause?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, before we want to add anything, we want to clean up, right? We want to clean up our system. So it's that detox process. In my book, The Hormone Fix, I write about my 10-day keto-green hormone detox. So just kind of cleaning up the diet, working with intermittent fasting and your eating windows, focusing on getting a good night's sleep and eliminating toxins that are disrupting us, whether it's in our makeup, in our toothbrush, in our laundry detergent, in our dishwasher detergent. And, you think we wash these dishes and the chemicals that are used in many standard detergents, we are then ingesting those, or our kids are ingesting them full of hormone disruptors. And so we want to start cleaning up, being aware. And at the same time, I'm supporting detox. So because of my own journey with early menopause at 39,
Wow.
infertility, told I would never be able to have another child, reversing that, naturally having a baby at 41, and then hitting that full-blown perimenopause tornado at 48, realizing, okay, what I'm doing is no longer working. What do I need to do now? And that's where I came up with my keto-green approach and really focused on that intermittent fasting and cutting back on carbs, but not too low, and choosing the right ones. And then the things that increase the most powerful hormone in our body, which is oxytocin. So when I say within ourselves, like our own pharmacy within us has the most powerful drug available. And that is oxytocin.
Wait, how can we get more of that?
Well, just like we're doing now, having great conversation, enjoying yourself, and also like playing with a pet, going out into nature, doing things you enjoy doing, and definitely a lot during intimacy and positive touch and orgasm. A lot of oxytocin is emitted then. And then to the practice of gratitude, being in the present moment and increasing gratitude, being grateful all throughout the day. And I know that can sound really, really sweet. And some people who are listening may be like, oh yeah, she's, it doesn't get like, life can get really hard. And
Right. I need a pill. I need a
I
pill
need
for
a
that.
pill. And I was at a point in my life, back then, in my mid 40s, where I was like depressed, I was stressed, my hormones were a mess. I mean, I was, I was so depressed, I was even suicidal. And so I get it. This is what helped me, and this is now what has helped so many women and around the
Doc,
world. And
Dr. Anna, I literally just got chills when you talked about this because I have a book out on self-love and I talk about my joy list in it. And it's something that I practice every day. I have a list of just simple, easy things that, release oxytocin, if you want to put it more scientifically, but I say get me in my happy place.
I love it.
But right, just easy, simple things. We don't have to make it a big deal, right? You mentioned going out in nature, doing things that light you up. I just have that, and it's different for each of us, right? For me, I love listening to music while I'm working. It literally lifts my spirits. Getting rid of stress, I really focused on just eliminating stress and not worrying about things. Like there's just nothing worth worrying about and causing stress in my life. And so you're literally a doctor giving us permission to look out for our happiness and our well-being and bring more joy into our lives as mothers, as, professional women, as women who do it all. We still have to make time to make sure that we're keeping ourselves happy and releasing those feel good, what is that? Chemicals, I guess, in our brain.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's like oxytocin opposes cortisol. So when you're making more oxytocin, you're making less cortisol. I mean, because think about it, when we're stressed and we're like, cortisol's high, it's not a time to stop, cuddle, and connect and have real true intimacy. Right.
Yeah.
So you're in that stress state and you can, you start to see it. You start to see it everywhere. You can say, oh, high cortisol, high oxytocin. All right. And it doesn't reflect what we've been through in our life. These practices are essential no matter what we're going through, and faith and, faith in a positive outcome. And that's what I call pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps.
I used to go into these yoga studios and see the people working at the front desk or the teachers, and they're just radiating joy, smiling like all the time. And I'm like, I want that. It took me a lot of practice to get there, but it's not yoga for everybody, right? It's what makes you happy, what lights you up, and knowing that and making it a priority to feed that, because and every single day, and making sure that we're in that state. I love that you're mentioning that is a key to combating the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. So thank you for that.
You are welcome. And it's one of the most powerful things we can do.
Oh, love that so much. Now I'm going to keep beating that drum. So you've
There you
just given
go.
me permission.
Yep.
All right. So I have some burning questions for you about bioidentical hormones. Okay. So, I went to see my regular doctor, and traditional medicine, and of course what they're allowed to prescribe or what's in their system, especially if you are with an HMO like a Kaiser or something like that. They have to, they have their tool sets and the prescriptions they're allowed to prescribe. And it seems that, the typical prescription would be a synthetic hormone, maybe a patch, with was it estrogen, and then a progesterone pill. So that seems to be the typical way that it gets fixed in your doctor's office. But I keep hearing about bioidentical hormones. What is the difference and the benefit?
So oftentimes, for example, estradiol patch that you're given, estradiol is a bioidentical. Now, it's a
Oh,
bioidentical. You may hear the term body identical. So that's a body identical. And progesterone, like the progesterone or prometrium, was a trade name, is also bioidentical. And
okay.
it's usually in a 100 milligram or 200 milligram capsule. And that's it. That's our armamentarium for bioidentical progesterone in standard, unless we're going to a compounding pharmacy.
I see.
And that's the difference. But many of the standard, like the birth control pills, hormone replacement therapy do contain synthetics. Pretty much all of the others are synthetic progestins, which we know through both the Women's Health Initiative study and way back in the 90s, the HERS trial, can have adverse cardiac effects, increase your risk of stroke, increase your risk of breast cancer. Bioidentical progesterone does not. And then I like to, I love the art of medicine, and I like customizing my therapy for clients. So I often use compounding pharmacies, and I combine E2 with E3, which is a benevolent estrogen, and it helps with skin and helps with cellular health, and it has really good conditioning factors, as well as it's a safe estrogen. And then I'll combine it maybe with some testosterone if we need it, a little bit of bioidentical testosterone, and very careful with the hormones we use, and also testing, not guessing. And I think that's a big piece too, is being able to monitor when we are using hormones. But I do use, like, my progesterone cream that I created is a bioidentical progesterone from wild yam, so very clean source, but bioidentical, and with pregnenolone, because both progesterone and pregnenolone are two of our mother hormones. So in our mid to late 30s, all those symptoms are coming when progesterone is sharply declining. And with it sharply declining, we get the memory loss, the brain fog, the insomnia, because we need progesterone to help get a good night's sleep, not just for the GABA receptors, but also to produce melatonin, to keep tryptophan active so that we can produce more melatonin. And when we start noticing these neurologic symptoms in the perimenopause, and our doctors are trained to do antidepressants, and it's not what
Yes,
you need
I hear
most of
that.
the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that seems to be the first stop when you're having depression. And they know it's menopause or perimenopause, and still the standard seems to be giving you an SSRI, which I thought was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so true. And the SSRI and the birth control pills has been, for the last two. I trained 3 decades ago. So 3 decades, like one of the first tools in your toolbox for, if you get any training on perimenopause or menopause, that's what you're offering. And
Yeah.
so when I work with clients and I just go through the detox and I support their liver, I use, one of my products is Mighty Maca Plus. So it's an adaptogenic blend of superfoods. And so I usually always put them on that because it's supporting detoxification, supporting your body's natural hormone production as well. And so when they come back in for their follow-up visit, they're usually 90% better before I
Wow.
prescribe them anything.
Just going through the detox. That's
Just
amazing.
going through the detox.
So, how do you test? So, my traditional doctor is using blood tests, but I know there's other types of tests. I have a friend who did urine tests. I think there's a Dutch test out there. Like, can you explain a little bit more about the different testing and what you recommend and use?
Yes, yeah. And I get into testing because I was a chemist and a scientist before I went to medical school. And, I did research in physiology for the US Navy before I went to medical school. So I love this stuff.
Okay.
And while I love all this different testing, and there's many ways to test, and I always tell my patients, I will test every body fluid you have over the course of the next couple years working with me, for sure, right? Because each fluid tells something a little bit different. And so typically I like to do a blood test and look at hormones and free hormone levels and your thyroid antibodies and inflammatory markers and markers of methylation. So and vitamin D is essential. That's always something that I look at in all my patients regularly. And so I want to get a quick blood test, but I often will follow up with a urinary hormone test, whether I'm using the Dutch test or the HUMAP test, or a couple other. Meridian Valley makes a hormone test. And then there's salivary testing. And I used to use salivary testing more often than I do now, but sometimes it just shows us another aspect. And usually I use it in patients who aren't on hormones, because it's hard to manage them when they're on hormones with saliva, but it's really good to look at the cortisol pattern. So
Hmm.
your your daily cortisol, and that can really help you fine tune your treatment. But I always encourage, though, for my patients to get really in tune with their body and their symptoms, because at certain times of the year, you may need more, you may need less. And I really want you to understand what your body's telling you. And,
Oh my
and that's
goodness.
empowerment piece.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. So what are the most common treatments then? And then what are some of the specialty types of treatments just to kind of give us a range?
Yeah. So in my world, like often I start with the adaptogens and the bioidentical hormones when I get to that point. So say a patient in menopause we need to add on hormones. They're in and I'll talk some more. If they're in perimenopause, often like working with the adrenals and ovarian function can really help support that through optimizing vitamin D, iodine levels, getting good night rested sleep and using the adaptogens, that can go a long way.
Wait, what are adaptogens again? Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, adaptogens help support your adrenal glands. They basically adapt to what your body needs. So, say, for example, when you're high stress, you can add adaptogen. My favorite is maca, and I also use it combined with turmeric and quercetin and resveratrol, also known to have adaptogenic qualities. And so, I'll use them together. And that helps support whether your adrenals are in overdrive or exhausted. That kind of comes in and evens out the playing field, so to speak. So they help your body support its natural function. That's really, it's been, a huge journey. It's fascinating world of adaptogens, but it's been medicine for thousands of years.
Wow.
It has been
Wow.
medicine for thousands of years.
Okay,
And
so
then,
that's more of like the baseline kind of getting
right.
started. And let's say you're 35 starting to develop some symptoms. If you start with that, that could help alleviate some for quite some time, right?
Absolutely, for even another decade. So,
Mm.
from what I've seen. So,
Mm.
and then if you're like in your mid to late 40s and you're struggling and we're doing this, well, I'll add on usually progesterone and DHEA first.
Okay.
And so I usually will add those two on. So I use the progesterone pregnenolone combination in my balance cream. And sometimes I'll add in oral progesterone as well. And if I'm fine tuning, customizing their hormones, maybe I always say start low, go slow. We can always increase the amount, but we don't want to have too much and then be fearful of
Right.
side effects of hormones. So a little bit goes a long way.
Okay.
And and then using additional supplements. I mentioned vitamin D and sometimes iodine if needed, if there's no thyroid antibodies. And because iodine is needed at every hormone receptor site, and vitamin D is needed for progesterone to work well and oxytocin. So, when you
Mm.
go spend the week at the beach, you think, okay, great, the cortisol, but all that good vitamin D helps increase your oxytocin too. So,
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. And what's the best way to get vitamin D? And should one just start supplementing and assuming they need some, or is that a bad idea?
well, based on statistics, like there are very few optimal um, uh, vitamin D levels. Depends on where you live, based on the equator and your sun exposure. So
Okay.
many times, yeah, you can produce a high amount of vitamin D on your own,
Mm.
but you've got to get outside and make that a regular practice, that you're getting sunrises, sunsets, triggering
Uh,
your circadian rhythm. And when you're like sunbathing or getting sun exposure to your skin, that you don't soap off your good natural oils for at least 24, and some experts say even 48 hours later, you're still synthesizing the
from
vitamin
being
D.
outside. So you're outside in the sun, maybe laying by the pool, not with chlorine on you, but just hanging out. And then you come in and you let that settle for like a day or two.
Yeah, yeah. I think you can rinse
Wow.
off with water, but don't use soap because that's going to take off your natural oils. And we need those oils to make good vitamin D. And so, oftentimes, I had a client in my office this week, or actually, yeah, early this week, and she is 42 years old and she's been struggling with weight loss for a very long time. And we're doing step one and step two, and she's still stuck. And I look at her vitamin D level and it's still really low. And I'm like, are you supplementing? She goes, yeah, I'm supplementing. And so she was supplementing a little bit, about 4,000 IUs a day, which should be a healthy number to start to increase it. So immediately I start thinking digestion issues, but then I start asking her and I said, well, how much sun exposure do you get? And she goes, she goes, I wear sunglasses anytime I walk outside my door.
Oh,
And she
oh, I
said, I
just heard
had
about
an
that.
eye condition. They told me just to wear sunglasses
Yeah.
all the time. And I said, that is the reason that we're not getting
Wow.
anywhere. That is the reason.
Wait, tell us more.
Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating to me. So, like, because I'm seeing her there, I gave her a vitamin D injection, which is a high dose vitamin D injection. And vitamin D works as an insulin sensitizer. It helps your, like, vitamin D and metformin work. I mean, vitamin D and works as well as metformin in many studies that have been researched. So, for insulin sensitization, so metformin is a common drug that we use in type 2 diabetes, or in PCOS or with insulin resistance. So, I gave her, this injection of vitamin D, and I told her to work with getting, blue light blockers for outside, but after you get the morning sun exposure, and start retraining your eyes to get that sun exposure. But that was that's how powerful vitamin D is. And yeah,
So
it can make a
why the
huge difference.
sunglasses? Because normally, like, so how, yeah, so this brings up an interesting question.
Don't
Like
wear
often
sunglasses.
don't wear sunglasses. So does it come in through our
Eyes.
eyes?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, plus it triggers our innate processing system. So
Hmm.
to make melatonin and I mean, if you're in the broad day, bright, super bright sun, but there's a couple hours a day where you might want that a little extra protection. But I've just, got in the habit of not wearing sunglasses unless I'm doing it for fashion. So,
Okay. Okay. That's such a, oh my God, that could be such a game changer for so
game
many of us.
changer.
Oh my gosh, I always wear sunglasses.
Yeah, and it's really, I would call sunglasses a hormone disruptor. So if you can, and what happens over time is, say, for example, you go outside and say it's 10 a.m. It's not real sunny yet, but your eyes are super sensitive. You can't barely open them to look lateral to the sun, or they start watering even. That is
Hmm.
a sign of vitamin D deficiency. And then you're not making
Oh.
good melatonin. You're not getting probably deep restorative sleep. And all your hormones work less well. So just like not missing these things is
Yeah.
very important as a hormone. I say hormone replenishment
Yeah.
specialist.
Oh my goodness. So the sleep thing was one of the most detrimental symptoms that I was getting. I mean, we need our sleep to function well. Of course, then the brain fog was there as well, which is also horrifying. But just a simple getting on. I had started with a cream, and that really helped to alleviate some of those symptoms right off the bat. So like DHEA in the morning. I don't know if you recommend that or not, but like DHEA cream in the morning, and then just a wild yam progesterone, cream at night. Is that like a good way to also like dip your toe in the water and see if it helps alleviate some of those symptoms?
Yeah, absolutely. And first,
Mhm.
it's that detox, because you want to open up your receptors. Because if you're just layering, layering, and layering and
Mhm.
never opening back up those receptors, it only work for a short time. So that's when patients come in. Well, I've been doing this, but I'm not seeing any improvement.
You know
Right.
what? I've
And you,
heard that. Yeah, like it worked for a minute and then all of a sudden it did, like a month or two, and then it doesn't work anymore.
You got to keep open the receptor sites. And I use, my products, Jolva, that I created back in 2016, has
Yeah.
DHEA and plant
Uh-huh.
stem cells. It's my vulvar cosmetic cream for what I say is the most important real estate of our body for quality of life. I'm telling you. So, but that has DHEA in it because it's very safe. I can use it in my breast cancer patients for, vaginal dryness, for enhanced sexual pleasure and sensitivity, to prevent clitoral atrophy, to help with, the relief from hemorrhoids, as well as for bladder leaking. So this is that adding the conditioners back to the pelvic floor. DHA is hugely beneficial for the
That is a
pelvic floor.
huge range of symptoms that one product covers. And let me tell you, my doctor actually recommended it.
Oh, nice.
She's a huge fan, and she recommends your podcast as well. So yeah, you're definitely well known in the doctor world too. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, your Jova cream though, she just raved about it. She was talking about just all those benefits, the bladder control and the dryness and all those things. So, but I didn't even know it did all those other things. So it's just amazing that you developed that, and I'm sure you're helping countless women improve in so many ways just with that one product alone. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think as I had gone through my own journey, it was like there was nothing clean that could help me. There was nothing available. And so it's important as we look at how medicine has evolved. And I think one of the biggest things is that it evolved to take our power away. And that's where I'm like, okay, let's turn this train around. Let's give you your power back. Like I said, you're your best physician. I want you to be your CEO of your body, and then working with knowledge, not to just take what a doctor tells you as that's it.
That's it. You are giving the information, and you also get to see all your tests and understand them and what each thing does. And just knowing that we have control over the foods and the vitamins and the keeping ourselves happy and not wearing the sunglasses and all that is very empowering. So I love that you mentioned that it's about getting your power back, because I think that's what it feels like, right? It's like we lose our power in the situation. It's very disempowering. And we think, oh my God, what can we do? And then to think the only thing we can do is put on a patch and take some pills. And, it just doesn't make you feel really good. So knowing that there are other options, that's just amazing.
Yeah. And then back to the sleep issue, because progesterone declines, our sleep gets worse because we need progesterone to make GABA, and that helps us get a good night's sleep. And again, it helps calm your brain. And estrogen, we need estrogen for serotonin, and we make melatonin from serotonin. So again, if we start top down, we're really filling our tank. And when we're losing melatonin, and actually it would be nice to see a graph of how melatonin shifts as we age, but I imagine it follows right along that progesterone curve that we have as women. But as melatonin declines, we have to stimulate it. So that's where the sunrises, sunsets come in, right? Free. We can take melatonin too. I'm a fan. I will prescribe. I will
Okay.
recommend melatonin, but I want you
Okay.
to get sunrises and sunsets. I want you to detox. I want to make sure that your vitamin D levels are nice and high, and that you've got the good, vitamins and minerals on board. So that's all part of it. The adaptogens as well, and then I'll supplement with melatonin, or like some a product I created, Night Seas, because it has tart cherry in it, which helps your body produce melatonin. So
Oh,
that's a nice thing to also do, and has more maca in it and some other adaptogens, so that you can rest and restore while you're getting a better, deeper night's sleep.
mm,
And with all the nice sleep apps and bands and rings and everything that there is to monitor sleep, that is something that what gets measured gets managed. And so monitoring your sleep quality can really help see what works for you and what works against you.
that's a really good point. Yeah, we have all these great tools that are low cost now to help us monitor that. And I know sleep is important for me. So that's the one thing that I just feel I wake up feeling terrible, and then I think, oh, I'm going to have a terrible day because I'm going to be tired all day. And then you might start drinking a bunch of coffee and then having this fake energy, and it's just not a good way to
It's
go
a it's
about
a
your
negative
life.
spiral. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure the coffee doesn't help us either. So, I have a question for you that I wanted to ask about, the conversations surrounding this topic, perimenopause, menopause. It was so taboo for so long, and I'm wondering, are you seeing that kind of lift a little, and people feeling a little more comfortable about having these conversations?
I think we're talking about it more. When I started in this space in 2014 with bringing my Magic Menopause program online, that was it. Like, it was the only voice out there. And we were banned from advertising on Facebook. Can't use the word menopause. Can't target, this age group or whatever. So it was very interesting, how we had to navigate even bringing up this very natural process of our lives. And I always say, well, menopause is natural and mandatory for every woman will go through it at one point. Suffering is optional. But now we've come across, been able to, with more voices in the space, have really been able to get rid of some of those barriers. But I will tell you, it is not something women like to discuss.
Mm.
It is not something women like to discuss, nor do they want to be labeled. They want to quickly say, "Oh, well, I'm past that," or "I'm not there yet." That's it.
Do you think it's because it might be a sign of weakness, especially in this patriarchal structure we're in, where it's like, survival of the fittest and you're worried about your job and being seen as capable and whatever do you think that has anything to do with it?
I think it comes to a woman's self-confidence and authenticity. And in the world where we can be swayed into more artificial presentations of ourselves, that's when we really suffer. Like dealing with that, I mean, I think addressing that, facing that is when we really suffer. When we recognize, like, I am authentically me, this is my truth, and you bring a sense of humor to it, then you can, it's easier to talk about it. It's easier to face, and you do much better. Again, when you do that, you're bringing your true self, and then you're in alignment. So your physiology is more aligned. Where I see women struggle is that they don't want to let go of who they were into who they're becoming. And this is the time where it's a metamorphosis. It really is. You're going from the caterpillar, like all that busy work, all that stuff, into the butterfly. And for a caterpillar to do that, for a butterfly to become a butterfly, you have to cocoon for a while. There's a transformation stage. So we look through this transformation stage, and we wanted it to be as lovely as possible, but to recognize that it is a rite of passage. I would no longer stop a woman's menopause than I would stop a young girl's puberty. So it is natural just like that. And so I think when we start talking about it this way, then it becomes like, okay, I'm good with that. I'm letting my sparkles come through and trying anyway. And so it's, you're claiming what's true for you, how you want to show up in the world, but being true to what what makes your heart sing. And I think that's a piece of it. The other piece is women do struggle. I mean, there's the incontinence issue. Oh, well, you're just getting older. Here, have some incontinence pads. There's the hair loss issue. Oh, well, you're just getting older. Let's see what chemicals we can put on your head. And like I'm big on hair loss because I had hair loss way back to here at one point, and pulling back
Wow.
my hair. I'd lost all this hair
Oh,
from
wow.
stress and hormones. And so I've got tricks for you. Don't worry. And but you're having aches and pains, or whatever it may be, brain fog, memory loss, and you really start to worry in your 50s when you forget where your keys are. You may have done the same thing in your 20s, but it didn't bother you. But now you're like, oh my gosh, is this early onset Alzheimer's? What's going on? So there are these fear triggers. What I'd love to see developed is community of women that are showing up authentically, talking about it. So if there's an area of imbalance, we're getting help and support and positive direction, and not feel we have to hide, we have to suffer in silence, we have to power through when sex hurts, we have to this is the way it's going to be. It's not true.
I'm so glad I asked you that question, because I get that sense, like even in the people I know, I bring it up, it's on my mind. I'm an open book when it comes to this stuff, because I think it's very empowering to own your stories, right? This is, like you mentioned, this is part of who I am right now, that I'm going through this. This is my truth. I'm all about being in our power, and we can own our stories, then we can be more powerful, And so I'm all about talking about it, and that helps other people open up too. But it is, I sense the reluctance, and all of a sudden they'll share I'll get a share that I was surprised to learn, because I'm like, wow, you never mentioned this. I had no idea you were going through any of that. And, but it takes, I think, more of us just being comfortable in our own skin and owning that story to really open that dialogue and not make it this taboo subject, or like it's a sentence or whatever. And just that, I think it's so empowering. So thank you for talking to me about that.
And I think we do have to empower our vocabulary, because we're not complainers, right? We're not going to be complainers. And we don't want to think that this is just something, I don't want to feel like I'm complaining. I don't want to burden anyone with this. But I want to really, again, this is so important that you feel empowered. You come up with creative names. The Japanese call menopause the second spring of their lives. And I think we should call postmenopause the silver spring of our lives, or something just, beautiful or fun and light. And you get a visual for that. But also, there are solutions. Many people have felt for the last 50 years. I know from when I started practicing medicine in the 90s, that it's disempowering. You're dismissed. You're, sent to psychiatry, or your complaints aren't justified because we didn't have anything. Well, our standard medical system didn't have good solutions for you. Didn't have good solutions for you. When the Premarin came out, the doctors started giving Premarin. People were happy until they started getting endometrial cancer. Then they created a progestin, which has other side effects, and we start getting breast cancer and heart diseases and stroke. And so like the tools we've had through pharma have not been empowering to women at all. And so now we have enough positive solutions and ways to manipulate our mind, our lifestyle, our environment, our nourishment for our body, our nutrition, our hydration, all of that. We have enough empowerment now that there shouldn't be anyone suffering.
I love that so much. Thank you for giving us hope, Dr. Anna. This is amazing. And you've been such a wealth of knowledge and information. Thank you for sharing so openly, and just for being here and being present. You walk the talk. You shine with joy and enthusiasm, and it really shows. And you give us, a roadmap for how we can get through this next stage of our life and embrace this. What'd you call it? Silver
Spring.
Silver Spring. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.